Namaste. I was going to address this issue in my previous podcast, but thanks to the wonderful political climate in our country right now, I had to delay this by a week. Anyways, so here we go. Last month, I think it was the 23rd of September, Tanmay Bhatt of All India Bakchod said something very fascinating on Twitter. I will basically read out what he said. So here we go. I'm quoting him. Whenever you tell someone, why do you only make jokes about Hinduism? Javed Akhtar has summed it up really well. And then he shares a link of Facebook which has a 4-minute clip by Javed Akhtar where Javed Saab is replying to a question raised by someone in the audience in regards to why the film PK went after Hinduism and no one ever touches Islam. I will basically summarize Javed Akhtar's response in 3 points. I will first mention Javed Saab's point and then I will state my reply to it. So here we go. Point number 1. Javed Saab starts by saying that he is an atheist and he believes in no religion and no God, and he's very open about it. In fact, he very specifically says that there is no God. Now, that is a problem. And this problem is with a huge section of the atheistic movement in India. Atheism does not say there is no God. Atheism is a negation of theism. Atheism says that the existence of a God is highly improbable. The key word here is improbable. Real atheists never deal in certainties on the issue of the existence of a God. Even a self-proclaimed militant atheist like Richard Dawkins clearly mentions in his book, The God Delusion, that on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is there is a God for sure, and 7 is there is no God for sure, he is somewhere at 6.8. Now some of you might think I am being a grammar Nazi, and how does this even matter? Well, it does matter. Atheists claim to be rational beings. They look at answers within the realm of rationality. So if an atheist makes a claim that is not based on rationality, then they should be called out. Words matter, and atheists should be very careful when they express themselves. In fact, most people that I meet these days are not atheists because they have contemplated on the question of a supernatural deity. Majority of them are wannabes. These are fashionable atheists. They are like those college kids who will start smoking a cigarette or having some alcohol because they think it is cool. And as someone who tries to be rational and seriously contemplate on issues, I find this dilution of atheism deeply worrying. Now let's go to point number 2. Javed Saab says, we have become way too sensitive and uses the example of the film Sholay where Dharmendra speaks to Hema Malini as Shiv Bhagwan and how he would not write this scene today. He then goes on and says how Hinduism is a beautiful and open thought process and it gives us permission to even mock our gods. He also raises a very important point that India is a democratic country because India is Hindu. Now I have no disagreement with Javed Akhtar here. Not even an ounce. As a Cārvāka Nirishwara, I have always maintained that Hinduism is the most friendly thought process I have ever come across. I have never considered myself as an outsider in the larger Hindu family. Not that Hinduism does not have its own set of problems, it does, and we should criticize them from time to time. But if we were to compare each and every religious philosophy across the planet, we will clearly come to the conclusion that all Eastern religions, or if you don't want to call them religions, you can call them darshanas or philosophies, whatever you call them, they are far more superior to Abrahamic or Semitic religions. Now, point number 3, and this is the one that bothers me a lot. Javed Akhtar then says that he gets shocked when Hindus challenge him to criticize Islam. He says rather than Hindus becoming like Muslims, we should try to make Muslims like Hindus. He basically uses Pakistan as a prime example of what an intolerant society looks like and how people in Pakistan have zero freedom. Now, at the surface, this argument is quite sound. You will see nothing wrong in it. Obviously, that is why Tanmay shared this video, because he thought he nailed his critics. So I have a few questions for Tanmay and his entire ilk that was basically going gaga over Javed Akhtar's response. So Tanmay, do you admit that Islam is inferior to Hinduism? Also, that by and large Muslims are more aggressive than Hindus? If that isn't so, why don't you crack jokes on Islam? Does that mean that you admit that you're scared of cracking jokes on Islam? Does this also mean that you like picking on soft targets. Is that being brave? Take my example. I criticize all religions. Yes, I always maintain the boundaries of civility, which I don't think so Tanmay does, but it's okay. Tanmay can cross that line. I'm an absolutist when it comes to freedom of speech. But at least I'm never selective in my critique. Guys, it is exactly this kind of behavior that has led me to disassociate myself from Indian atheists. They're an insult to atheism. Fashionable atheism is as dangerous and dogmatic as fashionable theism. Atheists in India won't criticize Islam publicly because they are scared. In fact, I would like to add Christianity in this pantheon or religions too. But they will never admit the fact that they are scared about criticizing Islam and Christianity. This, my dear friends, is a prime example of the soft bigotry of low expectations. People like Tanmay Bhatt and Javed Akhtar are making gross and racist statements, and they are simply getting away with it. The underlying statement here is that a certain number of Muslims in India are incapable of reform. If this is not gross and racist, I don't know what is. Just imagine if these words were uttered by Mohan Bhagwat of RSS. Just think about it. If Mohan Bhagwat of RSS would have said, Hindus should try to make Muslims like them. I repeat, Hindus should try to make Muslims like them. The entire left liberal media circus would have come all guns blazing. The first thing they would have said was, ye dekho ghar wapsi kar rahe hain. They would have accused Mr. Bhagwat of racism, xenophobia, and every possible pejorative label in the left liberal dictionary. But in reality, if there is someone who is the bigot in this case, it is liberals like Tanmay and their ilk. These people refuse to treat Muslims equally. They don't even acknowledge that Muslims have agency. They make such statements and get away with it. But do they realize the repercussions of such blatant nonsense they utter? Do they realize that by uttering words like Muslims are inferior, they are giving cannon fodder to everyone else in this country? Do they think the secular atmosphere of India will improve by saying Muslims are inferior to Hindus? I would have understood if you say Islam and Hinduism differ. But Javed Akhtar does not talk about Islam. He talks about Muslims as people. Is that fine? I'm sharing the link of Tanmay Bhatt's tweet in the description section of the podcast. In case you want to hear Javed Akhtar out, you can just click on the link. Anyways, I don't want to make this podcast any longer, but I request each and every one of you to think about the questions that I've raised. Ask yourself, who is the real bigot? Please do that. Cheers.